Hello, my name is Jonathan Liu, and welcome to another virtual program from the Gwinnett County Public Library. Today, we're going to do a DIY plastic models program. I've been making plastic models since elementary school. After reading in a history book or watching a movie, did you ever wonder if you could have a model of a particular plane or ship? Are you not confident in making one? I hope this program will help you get started and gain confidence in making ever complicated models. On the left, you see the Voth OS2U Kingfisher, and on the right, you see the USS Fletcher DD-445. These are some of my last early examples that I've made during my middle and high school years. What are we going to talk about today? Today, we're going to talk about how to choose your model, what skill difficulty you want to challenge yourself with, your workspace, tools and supplies that you'll need, and different techniques that will help you make your model better. So what model do you want? There are several different options. You got the plane, which includes World War II and onwards, ships, which includes modern vessels, which basically has a combusted engine inside, or sailing vessels, car or military vehicles, which includes tanks, space, which includes starships or the space shuttle, or sci-fi anime, which includes Gundams. Over here on the right, you see a Back to the Future 2 DeLorean time machine. I could hear a possible question out there saying, which is the most difficult of these items to make? It is probably the sailing vessels, because they have a lot of small cannons that you have to do, and of course the rigging. Rigging is what attaches the sails to the mast, which is very small strings, which is very difficult to adhere to the model. The easiest thing to make is an airplane, preferably around the World War II era, because once you get into the modern era planes, they have a lot more smaller weapon systems that might be a little difficult to paint and to attach. When choosing a model, size does matter. Here is an example of a 1/144 scale of a Zaku, and on the other side is another Zaku, but it's a larger size, 1/100. So if you want to choose a small model, it contains less pieces, it's less detailed, it's smaller, but it's of course more simpler, and is usually for beginners. But if you choose a larger model, it contains more pieces, is more detailed, is bigger, and is more complex, and is usually for experts. On the box of your new model kit, you'll see a skill level. Skill levels is just basically tell the customer how easy or difficult this model kit is. So skill level 1 is basically snap together your pieces, and it does not require glue or paint, but painting this model will make it infinitely more better. Skill level 2 is easier kits that require glue and paint to complete. They usually have less than 100 pieces. Skill level 3 are smaller still, but more detailed parts, and they usually have over 100 pieces. Skill level 4 are advanced kits with very fine detail. They're most likely contain well over 100 pieces. And the last skill, skill 5, is for expert modelers only. They have very fine detail, contains hundreds upon hundreds of pieces, most likely having moving parts like working suspensions, rotating propellers, movable turrets on tanks, and other cool features. Here in this picture you see my workspace. So I have newspaper on the desk. This will help to collect all the shavings that the model will create, and also to protect the desk from painting. As long as you have a nice big surface with a lot of ventilation, you need to make sure that the desk or surface that you're working on is very stable, because any wrong move will wreck your paint lines. Next, we're going to talk about tools and supplies. It's very important to use the proper tools to do your model kit. Your two most important tools to take the plastic pieces off the frame are nippers, which is the red tool on the left, or a knife, which is on your right. You can either use a knife or an X-Acto knife. It's up to you. I find a simple pocket knife easier to use, but it is your choice. The nippers should not cost you more than $10. The nippers that I have, I bought at Hobbytown USA for about $7. The next item in your toolkit should be paintbrushes. The paintbrushes should include very fine tips to very large tips to either do fine control or just put paint everywhere. And here's an optional thing is an airbrush. Airbrush, I typically recommend only those who have expert experience in model building and have a lot of money to spend, because these airbrushes can run up to several $100 and it requires an air compressor to be able to operate them. And then your workspace will require you definitely have a ventilated area and other specialized equipment to not to have your paint sprayed everywhere. The next, of course, is your paint. In your instruction manual, they will give you an exact paint palette to use. So all you have to go is to go to a model store, go Hobbytown USA, Hobby Lobby will have these paints, and you just simply match up the color to your instruction manual. And there are 4 major paint companies that you could use. The most popular, and I use most often, is Tessla's. Tessla's have both acrylic and enamel. I use enamel mostly. Then you got the Japanese company Tamaya Color. It comes both with enamel and acrylic. They have more of your brighter and more specialized colors, especially if you're doing Gundams. Then you got Hombros. They mostly deal with enamel only. They're particularly very oily, so be prepared to do multiple layers. And then you got Model Master, which is they deal primarily with acrylic only. I don't particularly like this one because it tends to be a lot more watery, so you definitely need a primer for this one. And all of these paint companies do have an aerosol spray can version of their colors. So if you want to do aerosol, they do have that available. Here are the other tools and supplies that I use in my toolkit. Got the square memo holder clips that you can put your pieces on so you can paint them quite easier. They're about in a set of 8 or 10 for $8. You got paint thinner here. If you take a look here, each company has their own paint thinner. So it's recommended that you buy the company that you have to paint for the corresponding paint thinner because they work much better than you mix up the paint thinner. Next you got the putty. The putty is used for putting the seams when you put your 2 pieces together, and then you sand them using the sandpaper or file to make it smooth so they make one coherent piece. And you have your glue. When you put the glue onto the pieces, just put a little bit. That's all it's required, and the glue will melt the plastic between the 2 pieces, so when they join, they pretty much stay together. So use your glue sparingly. So where can you get your models and your tools? You could get them online through Amazon. You could get them at Hobbytown USA, Hobby Lobby, Michaels, or a third-party hobby store. Costs of models usually typically range from $20 to all the way up to $400 to $500. Now that you got your model and all your supplies, we're going to talk about now what you will do with your model kit. So you got your new model. So what do you do with it? So first, we open up the box and look over the instructions. So it's important to look over the instructions and plan out when are you going to paint, which part goes first, and what needs to be glued. So if you see on the very back of the instructions, you see a color guide. It's typically the last or second to last page where you could get your colors or what colors they are at like Hobby Lobby, Hobbytown USA, or any other place where they sell model paint. Don't worry about this being in Japanese. Your other models which you buy at the store, which will be in English. So we could take out our parts from the box. And just need to make sure that they're all together. So you finish up taking out your parts and inspected them, seeing that they're all okay, they're still all attached. Now you need to take your instruction manual here and go to the parts list. Every single model kit has a parts list. So you want to look over and compare your parts to your parts list to make sure that you actually have all your pieces. Because I had one time when I was building an F-14 where a part was missing. And I had to go back to the store and reorder the part. So yeah, so double check your parts to make sure you have all of them. So after inspection and make sure you have all your parts, you think you're ready to go. Actually, there is an actual print point that you need to do. The reason being that when they press this part point out is when they do the two sides of the mold, they actually put a oily film on them. So when they smash the two molds together and squirt the plastic in there, there's got to be an oil film inside the mold to actually make sure that the part nicely comes out. So you need to wash off this oily film off of this part. So when you're actually touching this part right now, it's actually kind of oily or kind of slippery. And the paint will not adhere correctly on this thing because of this oil film. So what I do is take a bucket. In this case, I just take a simple shelving unit that I had, a simple drawer, and I fill this with warm water. You just put the part in here. You can put multiple parts. Just make sure that they're weighed down and fill it up with warm water. You can add a little liquid detergent in here if you want to, but warm water will do, and leave them there for a couple of hours. Then after that, take them out and dry them. You could either air dry them, put them on paper, a towel, but as long as when you're handling them later that they're bone dry. And then when you're filling them, they no longer feel oily. And that's when you know that you're ready to go to start clipping them out. But when you're clipping them out, don't clip them out all at once. Just clip them out when you need to, according to the instructions. So you may be wondering, how can you tell which piece do you need to cut? So here, I'm on step 18 here on this particular model that I'm currently working on now. And I'm building a sword. So it's asking for N10 and N14. So N here, and it's the same for every single model kit. N is the frame number. So you want to look for N. So if you could see this is N. Of course, the pictures help. So here's N10 and N14. So all you have to do is clip these out according to the instructions. So that's how you can tell that these pieces are the ones that you need. So after reading instructions, you want to do your first steps. So we're going to do how to take the pieces correctly off the frame here. So we're going to use a little scrap that I actually have with some extra pieces on it. So your first instincts will just take the plastic piece and just simply wiggle and rip it off. Don't, because these individual plastic pieces here, if you do rip it off, it will also affect the actual part that you're trying to do. So this is where your little nippers will come in handy. So what you do is take your nippers and just, as the name implies, simply nip the part off. Nice and carefully. But as you realize, if you look closely enough, there are actual little pieces on here. It's not exactly smooth because your nippers don't exactly cut the piece off quite clearly. So what you do here is either take your file and file it carefully, or take your knife and shave it off carefully. Why is it important to actually read the instructions? Aside from, how to put the parts together, you also want to paint it. So you got a couple of trains of thoughts here. You could paint it on the frame, paint it off the frame, or paint it post-construction. I use all three methods depending on the part I'm using. So here is a part I'm actually currently working on. This front part here needs to be yellow. So I'm wondering, do I need to take it off the frame or paint it right on here, or paint in post-construction? So this part actually goes right here on the weapon system here, on the very front. So yes, possibly I could paint this post-construction, but it is really a little bit difficult to handle since this is not much material to actually hold together and hold it steady, which is important. I cannot really take this off frame because there's really nothing to actually hook yourself upon using, your trusty grippers here of your memo holder. And again, this is not as steady to do some very close work. So what I'm going to do is to actually paint it right here on the frame. So to prep your paint here, so this is yellow that I'm going to use. As you can see, I haven't used this in a while. So what we're going to do here, after opening it, carefully remove the lid here, because you want to definitely try to preserve as much liquid in here as you can. I use, to mix this, a simple toothpick. So we're going to mix this up just like you would do with a bigger can of paint if you're doing home projects. And you want to make sure that there's no clumps underneath, because the older these things are, or the less that you use them, there will definitely be clumps in here. So you want to take a look to see if there's any clumps. So there isn't. So let's take this all down. Put it to the side. So since this is a little piece that we're doing, we're going to use, I have here 4 different paintbrushes here. So what we're going to do is select my second smallest here. And we are going to paint the front carefully. And it would probably help if you can actually see it. Let's do a second one here. This is not the best angle here due to the camera, so I'm gonna have to redo this a little bit. But you could see what I'm trying to do here. And it does take a steady hand to actually do this. And as you can see, I did overlap someone where I don't want to paint at. So that's why it's useful to have a little piece of tissue paper here and wipe the front. And as you can see, there's the yellow contamination of the front. You definitely want to try to fix any errors as soon as you can, because once the paint is dry, that is pretty much it. So there you go, there's the contamination there. So I will finish this up later. So let's put this back here, close her up. So it's important to clean your brushes as soon as you can. So this, as I said before in the beginning of the video, you want to try to use the same paint thinner as the company that you're using. So I'm using a Tessler's. So what I want to use is a Tessler paint thinner. You may want to pour some paint thinner out in a small package, but I tend not to do that. Kind of lazy that way. And again, you want to use, again, the tissue paper. You may not want to use a rag cloth because, again, this paint don't come off very easily. And you definitely want to clean your brush every time you use a different color. If you don't clean this correctly, they tend to mix, especially if you use red. I don't know why, but I always tend to have problems with red. They don't tend to clean very easily. So when I'm planning on painting, I always would do red and then a darker color. So the darker color will actually mask the red. And then the second or third cleaning, it will actually get rid of the red off the paint brush. So if we finished painting the piece now, you can see that with the black and all the corrections. So according to the instructions here, we're going to put this in front of the barrel here. So luckily these instructions have pictures here, even though it's in Japanese, but every instruction manual is the same, that they indicate the exact position that it wants you to. So you can see here, it has the two slots here on the very bottom, and it will simply slot right here into the barrel. At this point, it's up to you to decide if you want to glue it or not. Remember, glue is forever. So since Gundam models are usually level 1, it's not necessary. However, if you're doing skill 2 and above, glue is definitely recommended. For glue, you want to make sure that you're not doing it at the seam, because if you put too much glue, it will seep out and it will discolor your colorization. It even discolors whatever you put on top of it. So it's definitely recommend not to put any glue at the edge. So if you could put it on the individual posts, if you have it like similar to here, or in the holes, just a little bit will do, because this glue is just similarly to super glue. Especially with mono glue, it will actually melt the plastic, partially melt it to actually adhere to the other side. So that's all you need to do. And there you go. It fits right on there. So let's review what you should do after getting your first model kit. First, find the instructions sheet. This should contain a parts list, how to build your model, and also a painting scheme so you could buy your paints. Next, you should spread out all your pieces and double check to see against the part list that you have all your pieces. If not, then definitely go back to the store and try to order the part that you need. After double checking that you have all your pieces, it's time to wash them. Just find a bucket that can fit all your parts and place them and soak them in warm water. You could add Dawn or any liquid detergent to it, but warm water will do. After which, you take them out and dry them off using a paper towel or air dry them. Next, after checking the instruction sheet, start taking the pieces that you need off the frame. And I repeat, only take the ones that you need off the frame. Then using your nippers. Then afterwards, use a file or a knife to take off the extra little piece that the nippers miss off the piece. Then after that, you could put them together or paint them first, or after putting the pieces together, paint it then. Also, this is where you decide where to glue it. And continue repeating those steps of taking pieces off the frame, painting and gluing. Eventually, you'll be finished with your model. If you follow the instructions on this video, and of course the instruction manual, and have the patience, eventually you'll create a wonderful model that you'll be proud to display. Thank you for watching this video. I am again Jonathan Liu, a supervisory librarian at the Duluth branch of the Gwinnett County Public Library. And if you have any questions about this video, please come and see me. Bye for now.